On the afternoon of October 17, 1814, a tidal wave 15 feet high tore through the streets of central London. It smashed through a brick wall 2 feet thick, flattened 2 houses, and crushed a pub. It claimed 8 lives, and it was made entirely of beer. Stay with me, because what happened after the flood is somehow harder to believe than the flood itself. By the end of this story, a verdict that will make your jaw drop, and a payout that went to exactly the wrong people. The place was the Horse Shoe Brewery on Tottenham Court Road, one of the 2 biggest breweries in London, owned by Ms. and Company. They made exactly one thing: porter, the dark, strong beer that working-class London ran on. And porter needed to mature for months, sometimes up to a year, in enormous wooden vats. These were not barrels. These were monsters. The biggest stood 22 feet tall, the height of a 2-story house, bound together by tons of iron hoops. The vats were so enormous that before they were ever filled, owners would host banquets inside them to show them off. The star of our story was one of those giants. It held 3,500 barrels of maturing porter. That's 135,000 gallons, over 600,000 liters, of dark, fermenting beer, pressing outward day and night on a ring of iron. Now, every few months, one of those iron hoops would snap. It happened so routinely that the brewery men barely noticed it. Which brings us to 4:30 that October afternoon, when a storehouse clerk named George Crick walked past the great vat and stopped. One of the iron hoops, weighing 700 pounds, had slipped clean off. Crick wasn't worried. He reported it, and his boss essentially shrugged. "It happens, we'll fix it, no rush." The vat stood there, wounded, for about an hour. Then, at 5:30, the iron gave up. The vat didn't leak. It exploded. 135,000 gallons of porter blew the back wall off the brewery. A brick wall 25 feet high and nearly 2 feet thick, and part of the roof came down with it. The blast knocked the valve clean off the next vat over, and its contents joined the surge. In all, up to 323,000 gallons of beer, nearly 1.5 million liters, came roaring out of that brewery at once. And on the other side of that wall stood one of the poorest places in all of London, the St Giles rookery, 8 acres of crumbling tenements and packed cellar rooms, home to thousands of poor families, many of them Irish immigrants. The wave, witnesses said it was 15 feet high, smashed into New Street, brought down 2 houses, buried the bar of the Tavistock Arms, and poured straight into the cellars where people actually lived. And here is the detail that breaks your heart. In one of those cellars, an Irish family was holding a wake, a funeral gathering, for a little boy, 2 years old. The mourners had come to grieve one child. 5 of them never left that room. 8 people perished in all. A 14-year-old barmaid, a mother and her 3-year-old son, 2 little girls, 3 and 4. 2 women in their 60s. The youngest was 3, the oldest 65. In the days after, Londoners filed past their coffins, dropping pennies onto a plate to pay for the funerals, because the families were too poor to bury their own. Meanwhile, the brewery's watchmen charged visitors a penny apiece just to gawk at the smashed vats. Now, you'd think someone would answer for this. And that brings us to the part I promised you. 2 days later, a coroner's inquest opened at the St Giles workhouse. The jury toured the wreckage. They heard George Crick explain that hoops snapped all the time, and it had never mattered before. They heard that the great vat had simply let go, and the jury reached its verdict. The 8 victims had died, and I quote, casually, accidentally, and by misfortune. An act of God, not negligence, not a faulty design, not the decision to park 300,000 gallons of fermenting beer behind a slum. Just God's doing. No criminal charges, no fines, and because of the verdict, no legal obligation to compensate a single grieving family. But wait, it gets better. The brewery had lost a fortune in the flood, about 23,000 pounds worth of beer, damage, and repairs, enough to threaten bankruptcy. So Moo and Company went to Parliament, and Parliament said yes. The brewery was handed a refund of the excise duty on every gallon of beer it had spilled, 7,250 pounds. Call it close to $500,000 in today's money. Ride that again. The families of the 8 dead got pennies on a collection plate. The company that drowned their street got a government bailout. The law protected the beer and billed the victims for the privilege, and yet, the flood did leave one real legacy. The disaster made headlines across Britain, and the sheer scale of it sobered the industry up. Within a generation, the giant wooden vats were gone, phased out in favor of concrete and steel that could actually take the pressure. every modern safety rule about how we store dangerous liquids in cities carries a faint smell of porter. The Horse Shoe Brewery stood for another century, right where the Dominion Theatre stands today. The rookery was eventually demolished, and the 8 who perished lie in St Giles churchyard, victims of the strangest tidal wave in history, and of the verdict that decided it was nobody's fault. That's the fact. The only flood in history made of beer was ruled an act of God, and the only ones paid for the damage were the ones who caused it. What the facts? This isn't even the strangest flood we've covered. Our first episode was a wave of molasses through Boston. Next time, the biggest man-made explosion the world had ever seen, and the city it erased before the atomic age.